Welcome, 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 folks. This is Josh Mundy, and you are listening to a podcast for all seasons. This is Season 3, Episode 8, and with me always is my co-host, Eric Joseph. Say hello, Eric.
Hi, Josh, and hi to everybody listening. Welcome to our latest episode of a podcast for all seasons, where we will review Suicide Squad and recap month 3 of DC's Rebirth initiative. But before we get things going, I just want to say that for all of our fans in Michigan, check out Mega XP in Jackson, September 17th and 18th, though they have a kind of concert and pre-party, I believe, on the 16th. But you can find all the info on Facebook, and they have website links from there. But it looks like I'll be covering that convention for Dark Knight News, and should be a good time. Looking forward to seeing some of my con buddies and maybe meeting a few new friends who aren't always able to make it out to the Detroit area, because Jackson's pretty much going to be like a 2-hour trip for us. So hopefully it's a fun time. I love going to cons, and having more of them in the areas, it's always a bonus. But and before we get into Suicide Squad, I think you'll all notice I have a different picture, more recent picture of me as casual Deathstroke up for kind of.
You mean to say poor man's Deathstroke, I believe is the correct phrase you're looking for.
That and casual. I mean, I got the collared shirt open, but no gold chains. But if you want to be like Razor, you got to do like Razor.
That's right.
Something else I might be dressing up as soon. Might actually do the Razor Ramon thing. But I can confirm that I'm not playing Deathstroke in either Justice League or Ben Affleck's untitled Batman movie. But we're not going to discuss that in depth. But many of you have probably seen the test footage of Deathstroke right now, which look, freaking awesome. And I have a write-up over at WeGotThisCovered.com about reports that Deathstroke is the main villain in a solo Batman movie. So when there's more official confirmation casting news, we'll probably talk about it on the show. But anyway, Suicide Squad. I will say it's my favorite comic book movie so far of 2016. We still have Doctor Strange to go, but I think that Suicide Squad will probably hold its title. It beats out Captain America Civil War just a little bit for me. It wasn't a perfect movie. There's still no movie this year I would give a 10 to. But I liked how it really immersed us in a broader DC universe, bringing in mysticism and fantastical characters like Killer Croc, who we haven't seen in a movie before, and giving us hints of there's this whole history of the DC universe that's already there. And it can be exciting to explore, what's happened, what hasn't, as movies go forward. Some movies might be prequels, as it were. I do hope they fill in the whole Jason Todd story eventually, because if Deathstroke is the main villain of the Batman movie, I doubt he's going to be the only one, because I don't think they've cast the Joker and Harley Quinn only to use them in movies that aren't proper Batman movies, as it were, although Batman did have minor involvement in this one. It really captured the concept of the Suicide Squad rather well. John Ostrander, creator of the team, seemed to be rather pleased with the movie. What I think is very funny about some hardcore fans saying, this isn't the Suicide Squad, this isn't Harley Quinn. Well, if Bruce Timm and Paul Dini like it, and they say Harley evolves, if Jimmy Palmiotti, who's currently writing Harley, said the movie wasn't perfect, but he really liked it, and he recommends people seeing it, Okay, so if it's good enough for people who actually created the character, why is it not good enough for you? I don't get that. Why do people know characters better than the people who actually created them or currently work on them? I just don't get that. I feel Margot Robbie was Harley Quinn in this movie. She still had a Brooklyn accent. She wasn't as squeaky as Arlene Sorkin or other previous voice actresses, but she didn't have to be, because, not to insult any of the great voice actresses that followed Arlene Sorkin, and I may have said this on the show before, but everyone's been doing an Arlene Sorkin impression, and Margot Robbie didn't do that. But it's established that Harley does kind of have this accent because they pretty much feed it to you phonetically when you're reading the comic books. So if she talked like someone from another region, had more of like a Midwest accent, it wouldn't, I don't know, you'd probably get more complaints, but just her mannerisms, her delivery, uh, just that playful nature of her, just everything about it was Harley to me, and I want to see her play the character as long as she can. Deadshot was better than I thought he would be. Will Smith still played Will Smith, and there were many things in the movie that I just couldn't hear coming out of Floyd Lawton's mouth. But the character was there, his motivation was there, and I believed him as Deadshot. So if he comes back as the character in future films, I am willing to see more Will Smith. I kind of think Michael Rowe was more from what we expected from Deadshot on Arrow, but hey, Will Smith still did a pretty good job, and it's more of the gray area Deadshot that we've come to know in recent years, like things through Arrow or some recent comic books. Because let's face it, even though these are the bad guys, it's bad versus evil, and you still needed to be able to root for Deadshot in a sense. So they show you how he loves his daughter and everything. At the same time, he kills for money, but he also has a code. He doesn't kill women or children. And they also did a good job of blending this gray area to other characters, like especially El Diablo. El Diablo reminds me of, you see characters like this in movie and TV shows. He's not necessarily even totally he's done bad things, but he's less evil than many people in the movie, because he's just someone who was born into poverty, did what he felt he had to do to survive, and his powers ultimately screwed up everything good he had going for him, but he ultimately redeems himself again.
Yeah, before you continue, let's lay down a blanket spoilers alert for everybody.
Yeah, that's right. We're talking spoilers, but the movie's been out for 4 weeks at the box office. So if you haven't seen it, you listened to this podcast before, you know we get into spoilers. So yeah, we're talking spoilers. I'm not going to tell you exactly how he redeems himself, but El Diablo is one of the more central characters to the movie. Granted, they did bloat the lineup a little too much, but some characters had to serve their purpose. The fact that Enchantress was originally billed as part of the team and was the film's villain was a curveball, a good curveball. And to that, I will say, for people who weren't expecting them to go in such a fantastical direction with a villain and thinking the Suicide Squad should be running Black Ops villains, well, that takes away the point of them. Because then why would you have to round up all these people with superpowers and special abilities to do jobs that, regular guys can do? Granted, highly trained guys, but there needs to be a reason you call them the Suicide Squad. And likewise, there's this complaint like, oh, why doesn't the Justice League show up? Because if they don't, you don't have them. I should say, if they do, you don't have a movie. It's basically think of it as how um, think of it as how um, in Thor: The Dark World or Captain America: The Winter Soldier, there were these huge events where reality was almost destroyed. Millions of people were almost killed. And no, we're not saying this is Marvel DC. We're talking this just happens in other superhero movies. So no, we're not looking for a flame war. But if the Avengers show up in Thor, it's no longer Thor's movie. So you just have to take it for granted. Thor needs to wrap this one up. Yes, it is a bit of a plot hole. And it's a bit of a plot hole, if you want to call it one, in the Suicide Squad. But they need a threat they can wrap up, and the Justice League doesn't need to be called in because, granted, the Justice League hasn't been formed yet, but hence mid-credit scene. But we won't go that far. Killer Croc was cool, not totally necessary, but I think they kind of wanted more of a big brute, and they didn't want to use King Shark because I don't think they wanted to have the exact same lineup that Assault on Arkham did. Though he was very much in the same role King Shark was. Captain Boomerang didn't contribute too much, but people were like, oh, why is a guy who throws boomerangs in this movie? Because he was in the comic books. For example, people complain, like, why is Hawkeye and Black Widow in the Avengers? In short, because they're in the comic books. You want to have some of those classic characters, and I believe Boomerang's been there since the original iteration of the Suicide Squad. And then Slipknot, not many comics. They kind of reinterpreted him for the movie. People said he was a pointless character or complained that he was in there not enough. Well, if you're complaining he's in there not enough, don't be attached to a character who doesn't have too much comic book lore. But his purpose was the same purpose that KG Beast served in Assault on Arkham. There had to be someone that showed that Amanda Waller wasn't playing around. Someone had to get their head blown up and show that shit was real.
Okay.
So he got like his wrist blown up in the comics or something, but I mean, a guy having his hand blown up isn't going to raise the stakes by just blowing his head up in the movie. And let's face it, I might have even said on the show, I called the first guy to get blown up was Slipknot. There's no way they were blowing off Harley Quinn's head in the first act, when she's going to probably be so integral to the DC extended universe. Katana was cool, but not totally necessary. I admit you could have taken her right out of that movie. I liked seeing her, but she really did nothing pivotal. Maybe they could be setting her up for future movies, but when I think of Katana being associated with any DC superhero team, I think The Outsiders. I don't think the Suicide Squad, because she's killed people, but she's a very virtuous person in a way, and she's certainly the most heroic person in the whole movie. I mean, she doesn't get to show that, but she's more of what you expect from a hero, and people who are familiar with the character certainly know what I'm getting at. I know this is kind of breaking into a character by character analysis, but I've seen the movie twice in theaters, so I'm trying to give as coherent of an oral review as I can. But the Joker, something we're all talking about. Not too crazy on some of his looks. Still could do out without the grill and the damage tattoo. But I think I almost said Jared Leto did give a good performance. Still, I'd say, Ledger's better. But I believed him as the Joker. When he entered a room, you got the impression everybody is scared shitless of this guy. And granted, that's more of a testament to the other extras or character actors in the room. But he still exuded that presence himself. And I liked that. But much like Tom Holland's Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War, when people said, oh, he's the best Spider-Man ever, I can't fully judge Jared Leto until I see him in another movie, because I think he's only in this for what, like a combined 7 minutes or something. And granted, he's not very happy because he said he shot enough material to make for a Joker solo movie. And we certainly know now that they shot all the abusive stuff with he and Harley. You get a sense of his possessiveness, but the way they cut it looks more lovey-dovey than it actually is. And I don't so much as like seeing them like it's almost a real relationship. I don't like to see the Joker have feelings. I mean, we're all pretty sure he and Harley have engaged in romantic congress at some point, but sex doesn't always equal love. Hence, Craigslist. But I do think they should have had the abusive stuff, because we got the sense that it frames it like the Joker's after his true love, but I think he more so sees her as, she's mine, she's my property, she's mine to do with whatever I want. And I think that's why he was so persistent suing her. We did see he left her for dead at the bottom of the river. We see how fuming he was when even she was sitting on Common's lap. I forget what the name of the character Common was playing, but it was like, yeah, you can have her, but regardless of that, it was he's fuming to see someone touch his stuff, as it were. And just the way it was cut, it framed it a lot differently. Maybe we'll get some deleted scenes. I don't quite think we're going to get an alternate cut on Blu-ray like how we did with Batman versus Superman. But who knows when the official press release for the Blu-ray gets here, we'll know for sure. But I just, like I said, I don't like having those more human aspects to the Joker. I know they want also with this look, they wanted him to look like more a real world crime boss, and I get that. But he wasn't a show stealer for me. But then again, he wasn't the main villain of the film. He's not totally the threat of the film. But you could have easily had him just as much or slightly more than he was, because the Joker really was there to service Harley's story in the movie. Because in all truth, Harley is a bigger part to this movie than the Joker. And the Joker, essentially, from a storytelling standpoint, is playing second fiddle to her in this case. So it did fit. And although he was in the movie even less, Batman was so freaking cool in this movie. I just love how Ben Affleck's Batman is portrayed, even now, by two different directors in this new continuity of films. And it's this attention to detail nobody really got before. Tim Burton kind of got it. And of course, we all like the Dark Knight trilogy, but I still say the Dark Knight trilogy did not nail every definitive aspect of Batman. And I just like it how Batman looked like a force of nature in this movie. Like seeing him just swoop down behind Deadshot in the alley, just out of nowhere, and take him out, and then put the bat cuffs on him, was just so cool. Then to see him dive out of the Batmobile with the rebreather in his mouth into the river. It's normally stuff you think of seeing only in comic books. And yes, I know he's gone underwater in Batman Forever, but it just didn't quite look as right as this. It's carving its own path, but I really think we're really getting a sense of more so how characters are in comics than an auteur sense of filmmaking, if that makes sense. I'm going to seem like I'm droning on a bit here, but I think this in a way, it is a film DC needs. It wasn't a critical success, and it surely had its detractors among fans on social media, I should say, not social media as a whole. But the fact that it's now sitting at $630 million plus worldwide, it's projected to possibly finish at 730 million, which I'd say really makes it a success at $175 million budget. You factor in your marketing, but some people would still say, "Oh no, this should have made more." Not really. Suicide Squad until recently was basically a third tier property at DC, and although you had characters like Harley and Joker, and you had the Will Smith factor, still you shouldn't be expecting Avengers or Justice League numbers from a movie like this. It's still a fresh property, and for what it does, it's a success. There's no doubt Warner Brothers they're probably going to want to retool some things, but I think they're going to want a Suicide Squad 2 now. But I wouldn't doubt if a Harley spinoff gets here first, and frankly, I think it should. I really want to see her in her own movie because, like I said, Margot Robbie's just perfect. And don't bloat the Harley movie with too many characters. Just make it about her and a few others, base it on Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner's books, and you have a recipe for success. So I know we're trying to make good on time here because we have more than one thing to discuss. So basically, yeah, Suicide Squad's probably not going to top Guardians of the Galaxy, even though it's outpacing it, because it's not going to be released in China, which China contributed $96 million to Guardians of the Galaxy's success. So that's a big hit right there. But overall, Suicide Squad, I'm going to say 9.25 out of 10 for me, because let's face it, if I liked this better than Civil War or Batman versus Superman, I do kind of have to give it a moderate point higher, or I should say quarter of a point higher than those films. But yeah, it's a win for me. I'm looking forward to owning it. Probably, I would say the Blu-ray's out for Christmas. But anyway, Josh, you talk about Suicide Squad. Maybe you'll do it more coherently than I did.
Yeah, after your incessant droning. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, so I really enjoyed the movie, and whereas I would say that it would probably place below Batman versus Superman or Captain America Civil War for me, I would. Those movies are really, really close in terms of a rating. I would give, I there was things about Civil War that I didn't like, and there was things about Batman versus Superman that I didn't like. I will say that Civil War gave us in the theaters pretty much the movie that we got on DVD. The Ultimate Cut, I think, is a much better film of Batman versus Superman than what we got theatrically. For the people who did not see that in theaters, I feel bad for those people and the ones who haven't seen it still. So those movies are almost tied for number one. And I would say that this one it is probably around the same level as Deadpool for me. I really thought Deadpool was a really fun movie, that it was fun and funny. And I felt the same way about this movie. Now, first things first, I want to address a couple things. I want to address some things that we've addressed on this podcast before, and I want to address some things with as far as is concerned about the rating system. So now, Eric, if you feel like I'm being very repetitive or redundant in terms of my stating these things, please stop me. But it is this. So if anyone takes a look at Rotten Tomatoes, for example, one thing that I have tended to find very recently is not necessarily, I'm not going to say any of this crazy nonsense about, some conspiracy against Warner Brothers or DC movies. What I will say is that one thing that people tend to say is it's like, oh, well, Rotten Tomatoes is just an aggregate site. This is true. And all it does is it simply aggregates, for those who don't understand what that means. I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but some people don't tend to realize it. When I address this to people, they go, "Oh, really? That's kind of that seems wrong, or that seems disingenuous. It seems like they're misleading people in terms of what the tomatometer, or whatever you want to call it, the tomato meter, what that references and what it means. So 26% is the number for Suicide Squad. It's an absolutely horrible critical rating, absolutely horrible. What does that mean? Does it mean that 26% out of 100 is the rating that this was given overall by critics? No, that is absolutely not what it means. The actual rating would be 47%, which is still not great. We can address that. This 47%, as far as the critics' ratings are concerned, out of 100%, if they were giving it an average rating. However, what the aggregate score means on Rotten Tomatoes specifically, not all other sites like Metacritic and IGN or IMDb. But what must be addressed is the fact that the 26% rating is what the Rotten Tomatoes site does. Is it says if a movie does less good than 60%, it gets a rotten rating. Or I'm sorry, it's 65%, I believe. If it does less good than 65%, it's considered rotten. It might be 60, and anyone who wants to correct those numbers, please do so. But it's somewhere in that range. If you do not get that 60% rating or above, you are considered a rotten movie. So if you get a 5.9, out of 10, which is not a great rating, but again, not the worst rating in the world. It's definitely not 26%. If you gave a movie a 4.7, again, it is not a 2.6. This is the mathematical equivalent of 26%. When people just hear that, they say 26% out of 100. It must mean that this movie is worth, less than a third out of 100 in terms of its quality. It's not what it means. What people need to understand is it basically says if these movies are doing less than 60%, the majority of critics, 26% of critics, gave it higher than a 6% rating. So just to clear that up. Now, that being said, people say that the Rotten Tomatoes score is not indicative of anything and it doesn't change anything. Well, okay, then why are they using it to sell DVDs? Because I was in the DVD store the other day at Best Buy or Meijer or wherever DVDs were sold, and I saw a DVD that said it was certified fresh, and it's got the rating right on the movie, and they're using it as a selling point, right? Because people don't know about a film, and then they just say, "Oh, it's certified. Oh, it must be a good movie." And if it's certified bad, well, then what that must mean is it must mean it's a bad movie. So I think that it's becoming a very popular thing. It's becoming akin to, in terms of a ratings powerhouse, it's becoming akin to a Facebook. It's like there are plenty of other ratings houses as far as the internet is concerned. Metacritic, IMDb, amongst others. Not to mention all the individual critics. And I know that I'm ranting a little bit about the rating system, but it's something that absolutely infuriates me. I hate misinformation, and I absolutely can't stand it when people don't understand the concept of something that I think is indicative of a trend towards something that I think is unfortunate for a lot of movies, not just this movie. But the fact that they are using it as a selling tool means that Rotten Tomatoes is more than just an aggregate site. People are using it as a means to indicate the quality of something. Obviously, if an aggregate score is saying that something is poorly rated, then that does indeed mean. Now, one thing that they're not doing is they're never, ever boasting the audience scores on a site like Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic or IMDb, because they tend to be much higher. So in this case, the audience score, according to Rotten Tomatoes, is 68%. Again, not great, but a 3.7 out of 5. That's not a horrible score, and it's even higher on the IMDb. It's closer to 70%.
Yeah, I got something to say about that. And I'm not going to name someone's name on the air. I'm classier than that, but it is how people put too much stock in Rotten Tomatoes, because I was arguing on Facebook with someone recently who was saying that Suicide Squad was a failure at the box office, and I was like, what? How? And this was when it was number 2 for the second week in a row. As we know now, it was number 2 for 3. It was it was number 1 for 3 weeks, and then number 2 in its 4th week. So it's still doing well in that sense. But he thought box office rankings were decided by not how much you gross for that given weekend, but what the Rotten Tomatoes scores were. And I thought that was preposterous. And, he screenshot some screens. Well, that sounded like some redundant phrasing on my part, but he posted some screenshots from Rotten Tomatoes, and he's like, no, Sausage Party won the weekend, and look, people liked it better than Suicide Squad. I'm like, in those very screenshots, Suicide Squad got better audience scores than Sausage Party. So I basically just used your own evidence against you. But please, Josh, continue, and your thoughts on Suicide Squad.
Right. And I'm not using this as a treatise against suicide or against Rotten Tomatoes or anything like that, but I just want people to understand. So first things first, is there, these things are indeed shaping whether or not people are going to see movies. That, people say, oh, this movie's been critically bulletproof, it doesn't, bad critical reviews don't matter. Well, that's because 70% of people liked it, and word of mouth tends to be stronger than a bad critical review. But in a world where people are able to consume media so rapidly and so vastly and so in such a myriad way, so many ways, the people who are going to be a fly-by-night movie watcher, and they might say, oh, I heard it's shit. I heard it's shit on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm not going to bother seeing it. I don't really know enough about Suicide Squad. Yeah, I know who the Joker is. I've heard of Harley Quinn because, back when I was a kid, my brother watched Batman the Animated Series, but these characters are not very popular. And as far as movie star power, Jared Leto is an Oscar winner. He is by no means a box office draw. The same goes for Margot Robbie, and Will Smith has not been a box office draw for almost a decade. That's just the facts. And if you don't believe me, go look at any of their movies versus the box office gross that they've made. That they weren't in a movie that was inordinately successful, like Jared Leto being in, Fight Club or something like that. Dallas Buyers Club. Yeah, that movie made nothing at the box office, as most Oscar movies, Oscar-winning movies make. They make nothing at the box office. That being said, my review of the Suicide Squad. So I would easily give this movie about a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. Now, my review for Batman vs Superman was ranked in around the 8.5, and I would give the score for Civil War just about the same. I ranked Deadpool about the same, about an 8. I'll tell you why. So first things first, I went into this movie expecting to see an action genre movie. I expected to see a bunch of, wily characters. We knew the premise, the bad guys going after a worse guy, right? Get them all together in the premise of clemency. This is the Dirty Dozen with superpowers, all right? Or in the case of Harley Quinn and Deadshot, and Rick Flag and Captain Boomerang and Killer Croc, maybe not necessarily superpowers, but we got some superpowers in some of these characters. And at the very least, if Deadshot's not a superhuman, and I might have said Deadpool, if Deadshot's not a superhuman, yes, never, ever, ever missing a shot ever in your life with a gun, I'd say that makes you relatively superhuman. Anyone who shot a gun can agree with me on that one. But I went into this movie expecting a fun action genre movie. I expected to have a lot more humor than we saw from Man of Steel. I expected about the same amount of humor that we got in Guardians of the Galaxy, and quite a bit less than we got in Deadpool. Because let's be honest, Deadpool is essentially a comic book character. He is a comedic character in comic books. He used to be a serious character, at least semi-serious during his origins, but he's not been that for some time, because chimichangas and tacos are really hilarious, apparently, and dick jokes, lots of dick jokes. But this movie delivered in terms of exactly what I expected from it, and that is all that I ask of a movie. And I feel like the people who really went in didn't like this movie in terms of the critics. Now, if fans of the comics, fans of the characters, if they don't like some of these things, I understand that. I will say that there are certain characters, there are certain characters in pop culture that become bigger than the creators. Okay. And now I don't completely disagree with you, Eric, in terms of if you disagree with the creators, John Ostrander or Paul Miotti or Bruce Timm, then you must be crazy. Well, I would say that if anyone doesn't believe me, just look at Atticus. Just look at what happened to Atticus Finch in the latest. I think the novel was called "To Kill a Watch," not "To Kill a Watchman," to Sit a Watchman, or it's the sequel, the recent sequel to "To Kill a Mockingbird," and basically. The author, she just completely bastardized one of the most iconic American written characters in all of American literature. Atticus Finch, he's an absolutely loved character, and she absolutely bastardized him. And the point is that what I get to by saying that is that there are some characters, if you don't meet a certain type of expectation from the fans of an established character, you are going to alienate some. And I'll leave it at that in terms of, I don't necessarily think these characters were so alienating that they did not meet what they expected. Because let's be honest, nobody knows any of these characters except for the Joker and Harley Quinn and maybe a little bit of Killer Croc. And they know these characters only from the Batman the Animated Series. Most of these people do not read the comic books. Me and Eric have went over that at length. We're talking, a tenth, Eric, I believe, is the number of people who actually watch movies, who actually read comic books. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, if you do the math, it's actually probably like 10% of moviegoers read comic books.
Right. So we're talking about a 1/10 share of the actual people who go see movies actually, have some interest in comic books in general. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are people who are reading these specific characters in comic books. So if that is the case, I'm not going to say that, iconic characters like Superman, like Batman, Indiana Jones, characters who have become iconic in the American culture, that these characters don't have a somewhat expectation. James Bond, when we see them on the screen, Harley Quinn does not have this reputation. The Joker kind of has this reputation, and I don't feel as though Jared Leto let us down in terms of his representation of the Joker. But my review as a whole is thusly that the movie met my expectations. And I feel like the critics who didn't like this movie are seemingly holding it to a much, much, much higher standard than something like a Guardians of the Galaxy or something like a Deadpool. I feel like they walked in and said, because apparently it had Warner Brothers on the tag, that this movie should be the next, it's Citizen Kane with superpowers. I really don't understand what they expected out of this movie. I don't think it was the mess that a lot of people said that it was. Because frankly, if you can't follow this movie, you're a moron. You're an absolute moron. The movie was not hard to follow at all. It was one of the most straightforward films I have ever seen. The plot is literally this. The plot is the Enchantress is a witch. She's an ancient demigoddess who takes over a human form. Amanda Waller gets together a series of bad guys in a preemptive measure to potentially fight people like her once she realizes that there are much, much bigger threats than just the average person, that Superman is now dead and therefore will not always be around, and the next Superman might not be a good guy. Okay, that's the general gist of getting together the Suicide Squad. Maybe if we grant some of these people clemency or leniency on their sentencing, then we can use them to do black ops. We can do it under the radar so that the government doesn't know about it. We'll use some of the military might of the government, but it will be completely clandestine. And we will use them as quite literally the Suicide Squad. Guess what? If they die, Mission Impossible rules. All denial, a complete deniability on their involvement whatsoever. It's a pretty straightforward premise. And then the plot thickens. Oh, geez, the Enchantress goes bad. She becomes the big bad guy. That's the one little plot twist. And the rest of the movie is extract Party A. That's a clever little plot twist I won't give away. Extract Party A from the middle of the city that the Enchantress has taken over. Extract that party. Things go awry, as they always do in films and action movies like this. You think that the guys have won, and then something goes bad and things get worse before they get better. And then stop the bad guy. That is literally the entire plot of this movie. If you can't follow that plot, I'm sorry, you're a moron. And if you want to see movies that are, go watch Air Bud. Go watch movies with your children, because you don't need to see adult movies. Okay.
But I love adult movies.
Don't watch movies made for adults, not adult movies. I digress. But as far as the fomenting anger you hear in my voice, it only comes from a place of I really don't understand. I felt like I was watching a different movie. I understand why people tonally didn't like problems in Batman versus Superman. I'm not going to argue if you don't care for a darker, grittier tone. I understand that. I'm not going to try and argue against your preferences, your personal preferences. But when I feel like, certain movies are being held to a much, much higher standard than other movies, yeah, Suicide Squad, we're talking eventually a C-tier property. I mean, this is a literally lower tier property than Iron Man was when Iron Man, came out in film. And the only notable character that anyone even knows by name that you could literally mention to any person in a household in America is the Joker. That's the only one. If you said Harley Quinn, they're gonna be like, Harley, you say that to a Midwestern mom, they're gonna be like, oh, you mean like the Harley Quinn romance novels? No, like the Joker's girlfriend. Isn't that like in the cartoon? They might know because their kid watched it 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
Those novels are a staple of our culture. How can you knock the timeless American classic, One Sexy Daddy?
the Harley Quinn romances. But
look it up, people. That's a real book.
Oh, I'm sure it is. So we're talking about a movie that has essentially no notoriety. The only major star that it has is Will Smith. Yes, some of these people are, I guess you could call them up and coming. Cara Delevingne's been in a few movies. Obviously, Margot Robbie's kind of becoming a fairly hot property. She's on all the fashion magazines. All you got to do is just walk through a supermarket, and you'll see her on the cover of several fashion magazines. Jared Leto's a rock superstar and a movie superstar. I mean, there's no question about it, but he's not a box office draw. And as I already stated, go back and just look at his box office returns on the last 5 movies he's been in, and you'll see that I'm right. But in Will Smith, he hasn't been a box office draw for some time. Now, that doesn't mean that this movie does not have a very decent amount of acting in, and I thought everyone did good in the parts that they were in. The relevance of these characters, like you said, Katana's a throwaway. A lot of people said Killer Croc was a throwaway, and I was like, dude, he's doing high-level DPS. For those who like RPGs, he's essentially tanking. Like, he was just there to take the heavy hits and give the heavy blows. Like, I don't quite understand what people didn't get about that. He was just, he was the heavy hitter. But that's just a little nerd joke for people who like MMOs. But furthermore, I think that the movie succeeded in doing exactly what it intended to do. It was a movie that brought together a little bit of action, a little bit of violence, a little bit of sexiness, a couple little plot twists and mysteries. I actually thought that for as ludicrous as the plot is ancient demigod sorceress takes over a human body. They did it in an interesting way. I liked the idea that there's this relationship between Rick Flag and June Moon, who is the woman who the Enchantress takes over. I thought that was an interesting take on, humanizing this, because why the hell do we give a shit about some, ancient demigoddess? Well, okay, if it takes over a human who's actually a human and has human feelings and is in a human relationship, we might care a little more. And humanizing these characters, a la Deadshot, having a daughter, and although he's not a completely morally reprehensible human being. He's not a good person, but he's not completely evil. Even someone who's done something crazy as evil as El Diablo. Yes, you get the idea that there's maybe some redemption for these people. But I won't get into the Batman cameo. Eric already covered that. It was awesome. Basically, every second he was on screen was totally awesome. And there was a few other things I actually loved because everyone's talking about it. I'll throw in my hat into the ring on my take on it. I actually loved Jared Leto's Batman Joker take, and the reason is I think he was probably the most similar to the comic book Joker that we've ever gotten on screen. And I know Ledger did a great job. There's no taking that away. He absolutely did a good job. But he was more of the semi-crazy, but more just anarchist side that the Joker sometimes represents. And it wasn't a purely comic book related presentation of the Joker, although it was a very well acted portrayal of a character that is very similar to the Joker. I think that not only did Leto knock it out of the park in terms of acting, because he's a great actor, but I thought aside from some of the takeaway things that are a little weird, yes, the thuggishness and the whole little waning of the Joker, which I didn't care for, I thought that he was, terrifying and psychotic, and you didn't know whether he was going to kill you or kiss you, which is exactly what I love about the Joker. It's one of those things where, you don't know if he's going to give you a bouquet of flowers or shoot you in the face. I thought that was a very interesting take. I've talked to several people who even liked or hated this movie. It seemed like everyone seemed to like Leto's Joker, although it seemed like there was a very strange dichotomy of people who said, oh, there wasn't enough of him or there was too much, which was really strange because it seemed like almost everyone was complaining about there being not enough. And yet then there were some people saying that he was in it too much and they were trying to, rest on his laurels for success. I didn't feel that way. I thought he was in there a decent amount, although I would have liked to have seen more. I did think that Will Smith gave us a really good turn as Deadshot. I don't love Will Smith, but Will Smith's Will Smith. I'll tell you the same thing that I told a friend the other night who was giving me his take on the movie is, when I go to see a Tom Cruise movie, I go in knowing that it's going to be Tom Cruise as Tom Cruise. You occasionally get thrown a wild curveball, and Tom Cruise is going to play something like he did in Tropic Thunder. But for the most part, you're going to get Tom Cruise. You get the same exact thing from Will Smith. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a horrible thing. It's just you're going to get Will Smith. You're also going to get Will Ferrell. If you hire Will Ferrell, you're going to get him every single time. You're going to get the same exact performance out of so many actors who just kind of they hit their shtick. You're not getting a lot of range out of Christopher Walken, and I don't know why people expect that necessarily from Will Smith. But Margot Robbie knocked it out of his park. She did a fantastic job. Viola Davis, she was phenomenal. I really, really, really like her acting. I really like her in How to Get Away with Murder, and I was really excited when she got cast in this role. I thought she was just ice fucking cold and fantastic.
Yeah, technically Amanda Waller might be the scariest person in the movie.
Yeah, she is definitely one of the scariest people in the movie. And there is a scene in that movie which even I did not see coming, where I was like, I did not expect her to do that. Like, holy crap, she is just as cold as ice. And she is, yeah, absolutely crazy. But to round out the rest of the cast, I think the rest of the cast did a decent job. And I really, really like Joel Kinnaman as well. I thought he did a really good job as Rick Flag. I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more from him. I mean, he's kind of just the glue that holds the group together in terms of a little bit. I would like to have seen a little bit more Jared Leto's Joker, but I loved what we got from him. And as far as like an overall movie review, again, the movie hit the marks that I expected it to see. If you want to see a movie that has a good amount of action, that has a good amount of humor, has a few little plot twists in there, and gives you a fun summer-filled blockbuster experience, you will get it in this movie. I'm telling you that you will get it in this movie. Are you going to love this movie? Is it going to be your favorite? Probably not. Are you going to like it as much as Eric? Maybe not. Are you going to like it as much as me? Maybe less. But believe me when I say I watch a lot of movies. I watch a lot of films, and this movie was definitely up there with, fun summer schlock, I guess you could call it. This movie is not Citizen Kane. It has editing problems. It has some tone problems. It has some strange cuts. It has some strange narrative dives. I really didn't care for some of the CG that they did, especially near the end of the movie. I thought Enchantress was at first terrifying and then comical, and that's a really bad thing when she's the main villain of the film. But that being said, I will wrap up my review with a solid 7.75-ish, question mark. I don't necessarily know if I necessarily want to give it an 8, but I'd say a 7.75. It's a really fun movie. I think that if you like superheroes in general, I think you should see it. If you like the idea of the DC extended universe, and you think that you want to see a little bit more of that, or other characters in that universe, because it's a very big universe, I think that you'll enjoy it. If you've liked Man of Steel, if you've liked Batman vs Superman, go see this movie. You will like it a lot. But let's go into Rebirth. So I'm going to start us off, Eric. Rebirth. Let's go over all of the books that we're going to try and cover, and then we'll see how many we actually get to. So in August, we had we had Harley Quinn.
Well, technically, I have to cover them all because it's how DC is such.
Right. So we'll quickly go over Harley Quinn, Suicide Squad, All-Star Batman, Deathstroke, Supergirl, Superwoman, and Blue Beetle. That's August's Rebirth titles.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give my quick review of Harley Quinn. Okay, Harley Quinn, meh, don't really care for it. Not my style, not my taste. I think that she's kind of an overrated character in the comic books. I think that she's better on the animated series. I think she's better in the movie. I could see it being for some people. I could see a dozen women I know liking it. I could see a dozen guys I know liking it. It's not really my cup of tea. So your take on Harley Quinn? What'd you think?
That's my fictitious girlfriend you're talking about. So.
I know. It's fighting words.
Yeah, Harley Quinn. I love it. Same creative team that's been handling it in the New 52 for like the past 3 years. Jimmy Palmiotti, Amanda Conner, Chad Hardin, John Timms, those great people. So basically, it's just rolling it back to number one. You're still getting the same Harley, same supporting casts, same style of humor. So, if you're like Josh and you're not into it, you're not into it. But if you really dug the stuff of the past few years, you have no reason not to continue, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. And DC really had no reason to get a new creative team, and they didn't. And I'm glad they've stayed on course. And then I guess I'll start us with the next title.
But you forgot to mention one very important thing: alien hot dogs.
Yeah, alien hot dogs. And as I said in my review, I let more humor come out in my Harley Quinn reviews, because I think it's appropriate for the character and stuff she would probably say herself. So I let the Eric that I keep a filter on for pretty much everything I do professionally kind of come off when I review Harley Quinn books. But hey, it's not the first thing that has gone awry due to someone wrapping their lips around the wrong wiener.
Jesus Christ.
And that's and it creates a whole bunch of terror for everyone in Coney Island. But then we come up on Suicide Squad, which again, like Harley Quinn, launched the week the movie came out, so good timing, and there's no accident. But again, it's obvious Suicide Squad wants a third-tier property. Now it's a first-tier property. Because before the movie came out, there's no way they would have ever had Jim Lee drawing a Suicide Squad book.
Yeah, absolutely no way.
And then you had Jason Fabok drawing the backup story. I mean, how good can art get for one issue?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, the Suicide Squad Rebirth one shot was okay, but the first actual #1 was a bit better. Some people aren't giving it that great of reviews, but it was very much an introductory issue. And it was a good introductory issue. Now we have to see, like, you know, maybe #2 and #3 won't be so good, but I thought #1 set a good precedent. So Suicide Squad for you.
Yeah, I felt the same way, and I thought that it had a lot of the elements in the movie that I enjoyed. You know, it's. I thought Amanda Waller giving it to fictional Barack Obama was pretty hilarious. I like the fact that Amanda Waller's standing up to the president of the United States because she's just like got that, you know, fuck you attitude. I'm going to do what I want, and that's what I expect from Amanda Waller. She's great. They made her fat again, which is fine by me. But I think that they gave us the general gist. You know, these people are kind of crazy. You know, Deathshot's there to be a badass. Boomerang's there to kind of be I don't know, he's kind of an odd character. He's hard to play.
Through and through.
Yeah, he's hard to place. He's hard to place. You know, Harley Quinn's there for comic relief and, you know, a little bit of craziness. But all in all, it was just a crazy book. It was just a crazy fun book. And then they, you know, Rick Flag's there. He's the redemption story kind of. He's trying to redeem himself for you know, his kind of past sins. I guess sins isn't really the best word, but. Yeah, it's a fun, cool book. They're definitely trying to make it an A+ property. I don't know that I'm going to necessarily stick with the book because I am reading just absolute shit ton of comics at this point in time, amongst several other things. So on to All-Star Batman, though. I'll start off with that one. So All-Star Batman, let me just make one thing perfectly clear. I really hate John Romita Jr. I absolutely fucking hate his art. I think he is maybe one of the most overrated artists in comic book history. I have seen him draw good art. I have seen it. It is possible. Kind of like I've seen Frank Miller draw good art. It's just I haven't seen it recently. I haven't seen it in a long fucking time, in fact. I'm not impressed with John Romita's art. So I had to really look past John Romita's art to see Scott Snyder. And I'll be honest, I didn't even like the fucking colorist. But All-Star Batman was a really good title. If you like John Romita's art, you will absolutely love this book. If you do not, it's still a good read. If you hate everything that Scott Snyder's ever done with Batman, just shoot yourself in the face because he's better than you are. It was a really interesting book. It was really crazy. I thought it was a really fun. It was a wild ride. It wasn't quite as crazy and wild as Suicide Squad, but it was a crazy wild ride for a single issue of a Batman comic, kind of throwing us into a story that we don't quite know everything about yet. They really throw us into the mix. I'll just say it involves Harvey Dent, a bounty on the Batman that anybody can cash in. And so where's it going to go from there? But it's a really, really good standalone issue, what we've read so far. What'd you think, Eric?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I would say it was, you know, not to get ahead of ourselves before we do our overall power rankings before we close out, but it was probably the strongest book to launch for August. And it's definitely not the same kind of Batman story Snyder did with Greg Capullo, but it does plant a pretty solid foundation. I agree and don't agree with you about John Romita. I don't hate his artwork, but I don't think he's the greatest. But I mean, I liked him in Kick-Ass, and I liked him on All-Star Batman. I just really like the way he drew Batman in this book, and I know also the inker and colorist really played a big part for how Batman looked at this too. So it's not just the penciler that stole the show. I would really say that color really it's slipping my mind who colored All-Star Batman right now, but he did a phenomenal job. It's kind of like how I really like Andrew Dahlhouse's colors in the books he does. I mean, a lot of people tend to overlook colorists, but there are ones out there who stand out more than others, I think, these days. And then you have people who color their own stuff, like Juan Ferreira. I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. But, yeah, really strong artwork. It's not one of the flagship Batman books, but it might be the one people pay most attention to. It's just got the $4.99 price tag. It could have easily probably been a twice monthly series like a lot of the books are now, but they're I think they have a lot of material to work with, but they're deciding to do it as a once monthly. But yeah, it has a higher price tag, but like Snyder's Batman, I guess it's worth it for you. I guess the next one we move on to is Deathstroke, and this is a case of taking a character who's, I'd say Deathstroke's a worse person than Deadshot's been recently, but you have to make the character sympathetic to portray him as a protagonist, and they do that. They get into his family life. You see that Deathstroke is not necessarily the worst person in the world, but he does some bad things. Trying to knock down some bullet points about some of these books as fast as we can, because I got a lot of shit to do tonight. But yeah, Deathstroke, it's very cinematic. This is primetime HBO Deathstroke. I'll say that. That's the tone that Christopher Priest has set with this version of Deathstroke. And then the dynamic between he and Billy Wintergreen, it's like Alfred and Batman, but more violent and funny. You really have to read it for yourself. So what did you think?
I actually didn't get a chance to read Deathstroke. It's one of the 2 August books, that in the Blue Beetle, that I did not get a chance to read. They're still on my list of things to read. Unfortunately, I just haven't got to them yet. So I didn't have a take on it, but I love Christopher Priest. So I am looking forward to Deathstroke quite a bit, and I have heard good things about Blue Beetle. But Supergirl and Superwoman, I'll kind of bust out these ones real quick because, Superman tends to be more of my wheelhouse than Eric's. He's the Batman guy. I'm the Superman guy. As far as our greatest loves in the DC universe, I would say that he would agree with that. And as far as the super books are concerned, Supergirl and Superwoman, I'll tell you what, I'll touch that one first. Superwoman, I am not going to give away what they did, but Superwoman threw us one of the biggest curveballs. If this plot that they have given us continues, they threw one of the biggest curveballs based on the solicitations I think that has maybe been given in comics in recent history. Eric, would you agree with that or not?
Yeah, this is the equivalent of thinking Solid Snake was the main character in Metal Gear Solid 2.
Yeah, it is a really, really crazy curveball. So tell you what, I'll give away just an inkling of a plot point. There's more than one Superwoman. Now, there has been a previous Superwoman in the DC universe, and I believe that the previous Superwoman was Lucy Lane, which was Lois Lane's sister from the pre-New 52 universe, which is made very brief mention of. But there are 2 Superwoman. It's a very interesting take on the character of Superwoman. It's a very interesting book, I would say. It's definitely something to keep your eye on. But the fucking plot twist that they throw in, and literally the last 2 pages, I was like, did they just fucking do what I think they just did? It was very, very shocking. I'm definitely going to pick up issue number 2. I think that even if you are not a Superwoman fan or a Superman fan, because Superwoman, they've solicited Superwoman as Lois Lane. You don't know how she got her powers necessarily. They explain that in the comic book. But even if you are not, it is a very interesting and intriguing title. I think it will be going forward. What did you think of Superwoman?
I liked it, but it wasn't something that really grabbed me and made me say, I want to read more of this. It's not a bad book. And again, we're 3 months in, there technically has not been a bad book as part of Rebirth. But
how can you not read issue number 2 at the cliffhanger like that? Come on.
I will, but it's like it's not one I see myself sticking with long term. I liked Supergirl better. Granted, the Supergirl one shot wasn't the best thing ever, but I enjoyed it, and it's in a way I would compare certain things they're doing to over in the Flash book, where it's obviously friendly for people who watch the TV show, but it's not the TV show. But they're bringing in concepts like the Danvers family, the DEO, stuff like that. So it's not totally alien to people who like the TV show, but it's still its own book. But I'm really looking forward to how they're going to do this book, because we've got the Zor-El cyborg Superman showing up, and I really like Brian Ching's artwork, who's going to be doing the book starting with Supergirl #1 proper. So I'm more in for Supergirl than I am Superwoman. So
I'm actually flipped. So Supergirl I thought was an interesting take. Yeah, they give you the quick rundown of the characters and they kind of introduce you to who's who and what's what. But I didn't feel like it was as interesting going forward. But I'll leave it at that. I thought it was a decent book. I actually think of the ones that I read, it was probably the weakest of the lot. So,
and that just leaves us with Blue Beetle, right?
Yeah, Blue Beetle, which is expectations going in were about a what, Eric?
Expectations of a character I've never given a shit about. But you know what? I really liked it. I don't know if it's one I'm going to stay long term with, but it just takes the right creative team to make you enjoy a story. And that's what it had. You had Keith Giffen writing, you had Scott Collins drawing, and they made magic together. And funny with that, I know it's the last, like, one of the last page reveals, but hey, they spoiled it in like synopses and stuff. We learned that the Blue Beetle Scarab is in fact based in magic from Dr. Fate. He tells us that. And that completely turns Blue Beetle mythology on its head. So we have to see where that plays out. But as good as the book is, I just don't know if it's going to survive, because through multiple forms of media, be it on Young Justice, Brave and the Bold, Smallville, multiple Blue Beetle books that have gotten canceled. And I remember years ago, like one Blue Beetle book got canceled. Then I think they immediately started shoehorning backup stories with them in something like Action Comics, I believe. But yeah, it's like they really, really want to push Blue Beetle, and no one's taking the bait. But I mean, I'm willing to see where this title goes, but I'm not sure if it's going to sell, and I wouldn't doubt it if this is one of the first titles from Rebirth to get canceled, because we all know, like, even with the New 52, there's going to come a point, like in the spring, they're going to evaluate, like, the bottom 6 sales-wise from Rebirth will probably get canceled, and then they'll launch, you know, another 6 series or something. But we'll just see. But from a guy who is not a Blue Beetle fan in the slightest, the creative team got my stamp of approval on this one. So that tells you something. But from there, before we close, let me move on to our overall rankings. Before I say that, let me just say ones that are not making the top 3. Action Comics is getting bumped out of my overall top 3 from DC Comics. Still a very good book, but like 2 issues in a row, I gave a number 7 to. The most recent recovered with an 8. But they really dragged that Doomsday fight on way too longer than they should have. But it still has some of the biggest, most interesting DC Rebirth mysteries at its core, and that's why I want to keep reading Action. But lately, Superman's become a better book. With the flagship Batman titles, Detective remains the stronger of the two. I was probably the dissenting opinion among many, but I did not care for the most recent issue of Batman. Read my review of, I think it was Batman #5. In the Dark Knight News archives, I can't rehash what I had to say based on time, but Batman is hitting a speed bump, and I hope it recovers because they have a good creative team on that title. It probably will. This will probably all read better once we view it as a whole. Okay, what I'm going to say, top 3 books DC is publishing as of August. Again, Green Arrow. Phenomenal work from Benjamin Percy, Juan Ferreira, everybody. Just consistently. And that's 3 months in a row. Green Arrow is my #1. The Flash, still up there. Again, that title can really do no wrong at this point. We've seen Carmine Di Giandomenico. He's done only covers this month, but they've had some good interior artists. But again, the storytelling's there. It has that same tone you would love from the Flash TV show. It's the Barry Allen you'd love. #3, Red Hood and the Outlaws. It's just really nailing that darkness of Gotham and its underworld that other titles aren't having right now. And Scott Lobdell just knows the character of Jason Todd like few people do. And again, this is something I don't have much time to get into, but it's worth your time. And to say again, best August launch was All-Star Batman, but I just can't put it in the top 3 right now because there's only 1 issue. Got to see more of it. And then, but I'm saying even though it's not in my top 3, DC's best bet, Harley Quinn, because you basically know what you're getting every time. There's just this overall standard of quality. So Josh, if you want to say your top 3 or whatever as of now before I close it out.
Right. So I've really enjoyed Detective Comics. I think the Detective's been pretty strong. I'm about an issue back. I think I've only got up to issue 4. But I've really enjoyed it so far. I do think that All-Star Batman was really interesting. It was a super fast-paced book. It was pretty interesting. I've really enjoyed both Superman and Action Comics. I've only read the first issue of Wonder Woman, so I can't give too much of a rating on that. But I think that Superman has been really strong, maybe more so than Action. I do think Action has been a pretty strong book as well. I'm really glad to see my main man, Supes, doing well. The titles are giving us the kind of stuff that we would hope and expect to see. Again, Superwoman, I was just really surprised. It was a really surprising first outing. We'll have to see how it comes out going forward. I was really impressed with Phil Jimenez, his art and his writing. I really like Aquaman. I think that, I've really liked Aquaman since the New 52. They really just brought him to the forefront as a definitely a AAA, tier character. The Flash has been solid, and you're absolutely right. That book can kind of do no wrong. I haven't been as impressed with the Green Lanterns, which I'm also collecting. And Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps has been good. Justice League is not the best. You can't argue with, Tony Daniels' art. But again, I'm not as crazy, but you are absolutely right. Green Arrow has been knocking it out of the park. I haven't had a chance to do.
But you just mentioned Justice League. I should chime in with saying I think Titans is the best team book they're publishing. But go on.
So other than Titans 1, I can't speak to that. But I haven't had a chance to read any Red Hood and the Outlaws. Although I did read quite a bit during the New 52 run, and I did find it quite enjoyable. Suicide Squad was a fun book, but we'll just have to see. But I am a huge fan of Manipool's art, so I'm waiting to see what September gives us in Trinity, and then maybe Supergirl will pique my interest rather a little bit more. But it's been an embarrassment of riches, and I think that if you really like DC as, the entire universe as a whole in terms of comic books, whether it be animated, whether it be the movies, and I mean all of the movies. I mean, the litany of movies that DC has made. This Rebirth movement, which again is not a relaunch, has really been, in my opinion, a really solid venture at solidifying the things that they've been done really well in the New 52 with the things that existed before the New 52, often called, the pre-Flashpoint universe. And I just think that they've been knocking it out of the park. So, I mean, if you're a comic book fan, I've been reading, I want to say 3 or 4 Marvel titles, as well as their Star Wars titles. I've been reading quite a bit of DC, and I've been also reading quite a few indies recently via trade paperback. And DC's just been knocking it out of the park as far as every single issue that I've read has been an enjoyable read. Some of them aren't as much of a success as others, but every single book is really nailing, I think, the core of the characters, and it's also succeeding in kind of getting back to that basics feeling that I think that the Rebirth movement was really meant to get at, while simultaneously, moving the universe forward in an interesting way. But Eric, closing statements. Oh, wait, one quick thing. Shout out to our boy Dido, who is commenting in the chat. We appreciate you watching. And Eric, why don't you take us out?
All right. We'll be back, obviously, to discuss Rebirth Month 4, which will be the final of the major launches for 2016. They'll do more in 2017, but in September, we will talk Trinity, which you mentioned, Cyborg, Teen Titans, and Batman Beyond. So you can look forward to those. And then we will also we'll discuss a second topic. Right now, off the top of my head, I'm guessing we should probably talk Gotham then, because that's going to be premiering mid to late September, starting its 3rd season. So for all the latest Batman news across all forms of media, check out darkknightnews.com. For all the latest DC news across all forms of media, check out dccomicsnews.com. For our backlog of podcasts and other miscellanea, check out our blog site at multiverseentertainment.wordpress.com. Though it's not affiliated with this podcast, check out WeGotThisCovered.com, an awesome entertainment site that I write for. And be sure to check out our friends at culturejunkies.net. So until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Really appreciate you listening in, going through the long slog of review and comic book month. We will see you probably near the end of September when we wrap up DC's books for that month, and I'm sure we will have plenty of more to talk about at that point. RIP to Gene Wilder. You guys have a good night.